Welcome, everyone, to the Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Kendra Grams Pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Hudson, Wisconsin, and here today I am honored to be gathered with one of my colleagues here in Hudson, Pastor Lad Sonnenberg from Bethel Lutheran Church. He's joining me today to talk about his new position there, so we're excited to have that conversation. So welcome, Lad.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, so you've been in Hudson for a while, so some people know you, but I'm sure not everybody. So let's start with reintroducing Lad the person. What do we need to know about Lad the person?
So originally I grew up in Northwest Ohio. We were dairy farmers until my dad became a ELCA Lutheran pastor. So we went from the farm to the pulpit, and then eventually went to the military for the Air Force. I was in the Air National Guard, as well as did undergrad at Ohio State. And then following that time, I met my wife, and we moved to North Carolina for her. And then we moved back here to the northern Midwest for seminary at Luther Seminary. And then we moved to Arizona for internship. We moved to Illinois for my first call. And that's where we have our two great kids born. And then we moved here. So we've been here for 8 years now.
Wow, that's a lot of jumping around.
Yeah, we're kind of like a bouncy ball in that section of the world.
No plans to move to Alaska, Hawaii?
No, we're done. We're done. We're happy.
Well, so that's a lot of your back history. So tell us about why you became a pastor, what called you, what that journey was like specifically.
So when I was young, I was about 12, 13, my brother passed away at the age of 15 from a heart attack. And long story short, we were close and everything like that. I'm one of 5 kids. And my brother who passed away is the second youngest, and I was the youngest. And it was about a year after he passed away, I remember in the Lutheran tradition, we write faith statements sharing why we believe and why we want to follow Jesus. And ironically, we were camping over the anniversary of his death. And I was sitting in the room, and I looked at my dad and I said, Robbie, my brother who died, I said, he's in heaven because of Jesus, right? And my dad got this big smile, and my mom just started crying, and my dad said, yes, that's why you'll see him again. And at that moment, that light bulb went on, and all I could say is, well, why don't more people know this? I mean, this is the greatest news ever, that I will see my brother again. And my dad, just without even thinking, says, because that's your job. And I think he was talking about, like, the priesthood of believers. We're all called to share God's love and hope and everything. I took it a little bit more serious and became a pastor. But that's really where the journey started, was just with that good news, that simple news, that because of Jesus, I'll see my brother again. And that news spread to, why don't more people know it? And I started doing youth ministry. I got more active in the church at that time. And then when I graduated high school, I became a youth director also, along of being in the military and going through college. And so I had a lot of years of youth ministry before I finally took the plunge and became a pastor.
So a very personally rooted
Yes.
journey for you. It's certainly how it starts. So on to your new role. You've been at Bethel for 8 years.
Yes.
But now you're taking the role of lead pastor.
Correct.
So tell us about that transition. What's changing for you? What's changing for Bethel? What's staying the same?
So some of the big changes will be is, up to this point for the past 8 years, I've overseen the Children, Youth, and Family Ministries program alongside of the youth team, the staff that we have that oversee it. And then I also did Mission and Justice. And so the big role that will change is, now that I'm the lead pastor, I get to have the privilege of overseeing everything versus just one piece of the pie. So by stepping into the lead role, my focus will be a lot on visioning and strategic planning and more community presence and working alongside of others, attending HAMA meetings and other...
HAMA, for those who don't know, is?
Hudson Area Ministerial Association.
Yes.
So I say that a lot of times. And so I'll be doing a lot more of that. I'll still do the traditional preaching and teaching and all those things that are involved. But then we'll be bringing on another pastor. We're just getting ready to work on creating a committee to help do that. And so we'll be bringing somebody in to take on the role of faith formation. And so they will be overseeing all of the educational programming. And the other pastor, Pastor Chris, Krzyzewski has actually been moved to being an executive pastor for our church. So we'll be working side by side together as she really starts to help with the operations and making sure everything gets to completion and is done well. So we're excited about this new team, but the things that don't change is just being present, still being able to walk with the congregation, being able to be in the lives of still the youth, but also the adults and those that are both here and those that are away in their cabins or wherever they are.
Yeah. So as we film, it's about mid-June. If I remember correctly, you moved into this role 1st of May?
Yep, May 1st was the first day.
So 6 weeks in, what have you learned already?
Yeah, that's a great question. I learned I, one, have a great team. And I think that's always been an important part, is that I get to lead other leaders. And that's what I always look for in staff. And so we have a lot of people who are gifted and able to do amazing things, to take things on that I don't have to, or that I can turn to for guidance and insight. So I think that's one of the things that, whether I learned it or I was really reminded of it, I was also reminded of how well our church is able to handle transition. We've been through a process of about 1.5 years to call a lead, from the moment when our previous senior pastor retired, Pastor John, and that's a long time for a church to go without a senior or lead pastor, and they just continue to persevere. They didn't give up. And they continue to stay active and truly be Bethel. And so I think those are some of the things that encouraged me, is that the church does well with a lead, but the church does well regardless, because they're faithful to the gospel, they're faithful to it. So I just have really appreciated that they keep on charging. And so sometimes I feel like what I've learned is I have to catch up. I'm running behind them sometimes. So, and they're showing a lot of grace. That's one of the things, again, I know that they've been people of grace because they've dealt with me for 8 years, but they also show grace as I continue to learn things that I don't know. There's the things that you thought you knew, but you don't know, and then there's those things that you really don't know, and you need to learn them, so.
Yeah. And what are you personally, as a pastor, growing in your profession, what are you most excited about as you step fully into this position?
The first word that came to me is dreaming. That's one of the reasons that I really felt called into senior leadership. And being able to dream of where Bethel is going to be in the next 3, 10, 20, 30 years, how we continue to make a difference, not just locally in those that are in our congregation, but throughout the U.S. and throughout the world. Dreaming about our preschool program and all those other things. I just get excited about that, but I also get excited about walking with others that are excited about dreaming and hearing their dreams and seeing how we can bring life to that. And so we just got done creating a contract to put some prairie land in at our Highlands campus just east of our facility. And just to see that dream that's always been sitting out there finally come to completion. We had a great group of people come out yesterday and cut down trees, and to see that possibility. And there's so many other of those things that you see happening, and that's above and beyond the day-to-day operations that give life of like, oh, this is something new. And so I get really excited about that. And ironically, I get excited about the challenges, because then that means that we get to spend time with God and others to see the opportunities that will come forth.
Which leads perfectly into my next question. So it's a time of upheaval in the world. It's certainly also a time of upheaval in the church as culture changes and shifts. What do you see as some of the key challenges that Bethel is facing in the next 5-10 years? And how are you working with others, I'm sure, to try to address those?
Yeah. Well, one of the areas that, we see just specifically here in Hudson, is the population change. Good or bad, it's changing. The 55 and ups are increasing, and the young families are decreasing. So in the church, we're seeing that with our preschool, as well as our programming and our worship and our other events for adults. So what's we can see it as a negative, but we can also see it as a positive of asking, where is God calling us to be the church right now, and to who? Who is around us? As we continue, I envision that as we continue to provide great youth ministry, we now get an opportunity to step up. Not that we haven't had a good, but we get to even enhance our focus on our adult ministry for that 55 and up group, because that's who's moving here. So we get to ask those fun questions of, how are you fed? How do you walk? How do you feel like you can live out a mission like Connect, Grow, Serve? And what are the ways that you connect with others? So those are kind of the ways that I think as we start to look at the changing demographics here in Hudson, it's just asking the right question. Instead of seeing the problem, it's asking the right question to what we see. I would say politically and all of that, I think the church as a whole has a crucial role to get back to the heart. And I believe there's a lot of great churches that are. But getting back to not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. And we're all guilty at the times that we fall off, and I know I am. And so I hope, especially as we get into this campaign season and as everything, I hope what people see is that Bethel and all Christianity is a place where we can come with our opinions, whether we agree or disagree, and not forget what unites us. And therefore, because of what unites us, we can then have healthy, safe, effective conversations on where we disagree with. And I think there really is back to that when it comes to the political world, with the understanding of Christendom being long gone. I really think for the church, it's saying, okay, so now what? How do we reach those that aren't going to be reached how we used to do it for so many years? How do we reach the people that are competing with sports and competing with cabins and competing with whatever? And I think the worst thing we can do is say, if you aren't with us, then tough break. I think the church gets to have that opportunity that we see that, like even Jesus said, we're not going to worship on this mount or that mount. We're not going to be confined to a closed-minded understanding of it. We can do even more. So if you worship in the church, that's great, but how do we reach those that don't? We just need to find those ways to meet them and do that. So again, I think it's just trusting the Holy Spirit. We'll be working in me. One of my mentors back in seminary always said, Lad, you don't have to be the smartest person. You just have to have the smartest people around you. And I think that's the key of the church. You don't need the smartest leader. You need a lot of great smart leaders to be able to help. And that's how we've been doing it and how we get to continue to do it.
Great. Well, one final question. You said dreaming is what excites you the most. So here's a challenge. As a community leader in Hudson, with Bethel as part of that, what is your dream for the Hudson area, let's say about 10 years from now, in 2035? What would you love to see and have Bethel be part of in our community in 2035?
I hope we become a place that sees the diversity that is present and is able to embrace and walk with it. So often I hear people say, Hudson's not diverse. We're just a whole bunch of white people. But yet we're still diverse. There's something that still makes people different. I want to be a place that welcomes people of different colors and religions and practices. I want to be that, but I don't want to be a community that sees the differences between just us and starts to build walls. I would like to continue to see Bethel to be that place that is welcoming to not just those that are outsiders in, but to welcome those that are different, those that are in that low income structure, those that aren't privileged to have the freedoms and the means that we have, whether that's through our school system, through our churches, through other organizations like Operation Help. How do we help lift people up? How do we come side by side? So that when people look at Hudson, what they really start to see is a community that loves each other and therefore is united together, even with differing views on politics or whatever, but they still can come and sit at the table together. They can still say, I know we're different, but yet we're still the same. We both call this place home. And so I really hope to be able to start to see that. And I guess, as a father of young kids, you kind of see that demographic play into schools. And so I think, sometimes our schools reflect what our community is. And so how do we start to work with that? So that's where I really do. I really hope that Bethel becomes a place that people know that they're welcome and they can come as they are. And that doesn't mean I have to be what that person is. What it means is I can accept that person as they accept me.
Great. Great dreams. We live in hope, right?
That's right.
And keep working on it. Well, thank you, Lad, for making the time to be in conversation with us. And as we wrap up, thank you to all of you for taking the time to listen. Hopefully it was enlivening for you as well. And maybe you can dream with Lad about the future of our community as we all seek to build a place that is whole and welcoming for all. So until next time, we wish you peace and wholeness.